everybody, welcome to another episode of Vinyl Fetish. This is Randy here. We're doing a little remodel on the Vinyl Attic. And so I thought I'd pop up here before Andy paints this whole thing and we reorganize the vinyl to give you a quick run through for those Beatle fans out there of my Beatles 12-inch collection. This is not the Beatles singles, this is no solo stuff or weird, Yoko Ono records with John Lennon on it. This is just my Beatles albums. I thought I'd give you a quick run through. I've started collecting in, I guess, in 1976, and had all the basic Beatles stuff by 78, and this is the stuff I've added since then, but most of it was collected in the 60s. So here we go. You're right, and roughly in chronological order. We have, of course, the Beatles' first album, Please Please Me, 1963. Their second album with the Beatles. These are the British pressings, 1963. These are all the original ones, by the way. These aren't reissues from later. The first American record officially was the VJ introducing the Beatles album, which came out this week in 1964. And then, of course, the record that was #1 the month I was born, Meet the Beatles, February 1964. Right? I bought it at Chortles Records for $5.99. Songs and pictures of the fabulous Beatles. There's a whole bunch of VJ, where they were trying to capitalize on Beatlemania. And then we have the Beatles' second album, all these Capitol albums. We have another VJ here, the Beatles Tell All, which is snippets of interviews. Something New, still in 64. The Beatles Story, Capitol's attempt to kind of capitalize on their own mania with some kind of cool live stuff from Hollywood Bowl before it ever actually came out. Hard Day's Night, the original American pressing of Hard Day's Night with all the incidental music. End of 64, Beatles looking a little tired, Beatles for Sale, the British album. The American version, Beatles 65. Now we're firmly into 1965. This is the American version of Help with the weird sitar music on it that turned George Harrison into a sitar fan. Beatles VI. Look at them. That was such a great record. The American version of Rubber Soul in 1965. Yesterday and Today, which took some songs off of Help and some singles and upcoming tracks off of Revolver. I had a Butcher cover, but I had to sell it, but I miss that Butcher cover dearly. Not a Butcher cover. A Japanese pressing of the Beatles Revolver with the English lineup. The American version. Oh, this is the American version. This is the American version of Revolver. Another copy of the American. Just you have to back up a Revolver. It's the greatest album of all time. Collection of Beatles Oldies, the record they released while they were in the studio making Pepper to fulfill their obligation to the Christmas market. And of course, 67, Sgt. Pepper's, we all know this. Later in 67, Magical Mystery Tour, an American album, not initially a Beatles British album. The German pressing of Magical Mystery Tour. In 1968, we're firmly into the White Album. This is the 1978 white vinyl edition that I bought in 1978 when I was 14 on white vinyl. It's pretty cool, the Apple label. And then early 69, we've got Yellow Submarine, and then of course now we're up to Abbey Road. And then 1970, we've got Let It Be, the end of the official collection. But of course Alan Klein released the Hey Jude album to make up for some of the missing pieces. And then here's a bootleg of the Christmas records that came out in 1970. We've got the Beatles Red album on red vinyl that I got when it came out in the 70s. An Apple pressing of the Red album. The Beatles Blue album on blue vinyl. We've got the Young Blood Beatles album, which is some of the Hamburg recordings. We're moving into some bootlegs here, like Sweet Apple Tracks, great bootleg. The David Wigg interviews, which I listened to constantly as a kid, aside for each of the 4 Beatles. The first Beatles album I ever bought, Rock and Roll Music, 1976. I was 12 years old, and this is my introduction to the Beatles. John Lennon offered to do the cover. Capitol said, no, we got a better idea for a cover. It's like scrappy 50s theme, I don't know. And then of course Hollywood Bowl, which finally has been released thanks to Ron Howard on CD. The Beatles Love Songs, capitalizing on kind of the popularity of Wings and the renewed popularity of the Beatles. This is the My Bonnie, Tony Sheridan recordings. Another Beatles bootleg, Rough Notes. And then we get into the picture discs that were very big in 1978. This is Sgt. Pepper's. Bought all these right when they came out, and Abbey Road on picture disc. A couple bootlegs I got at Beatle Fest 78, the Beatles versus Don Ho, which is kind of a takeoff of the Beatles versus the Four Seasons. The Beatles solo bootleg. Here's the controversial record from 77, the Beatles Star Club on Linnasong. I still think this is an amazing record to listen to. This is the EMI recordings, the Decca demos on picture disc with good old Pete Best on drums. Pete Best, we love you. The American Rarities album. And then we get into the half-speed masters that were very big in the late 70s. This is the half-speed master of Sgt. Pepper's. This is before CDs, so this was like the top of the line. Half-speed master of the White Album, which I paid $26.99 for, but I got an employee discount for $20.29. Working at a record store. Abbey Road. And then one of the weirdest Capitol compilations was the Beatles' Real Music. This is still unopened, by the way. $7.99 when it came out. And then another bootleg on called Timeless on a picture disc. Another bootleg called The Beatles Wonderful Pictures of You. This is, you know, before the internet, you really had to track this stuff down. The Golden Beatles, another bootleg album. The Beatles Talk Down Under interviews from Australia in 1964. The Beatles #1s. This is before the #1 album came out in the United States. This was a British release. Also Beatles Rarities. This was in the original box set of EMI releases. Another bootleg, Strawberry Field bootleg. Nothing is Real. This is a Beatles album I got in Eastern Europe. That's all in Russian. It's called Expedites R&R Beatles, and it's all written in Russian. And I got When the Wall Fell. This is Beatles Talk, an interview record. And the most recent thing I have on vinyl is the second edition or second volume of the Beatles Anthology album. I'm going to try to get 1 and 3 soon, but this one is just sort of a must-have on vinyl. So that's all my vinyl. I'd be interested if you have things that I don't have that I should track down. But that's a quick run through. Pretty soon this room is going to look very different. And we'll do some other run throughs, including maybe solo and singles. But that's some Beatles vinyl. And if you don't have it, try finding it. I challenge you. Try finding some of this stuff on vinyl. Okay, peace. Like and love and be unplugged. Alright, peace everybody.